Faith. It is, without a doubt, one of the most powerful forces in human experience. But have you ever stopped to wonder what's actually happening inside our minds when we believe? Well, today, we're going to peel back the layers, moving beyond theology to uncover the psychological blueprint of belief itself.
It's the big one, right? Why do we believe? It's a question so many of us have asked, no matter what our own personal beliefs are. What is it that drives this incredibly profound human tendency? What's going on in our brains that makes faith so powerful and so compelling for so many people around the world?
And look, before we dive in, I just want to be super clear. We're not getting into theology here, and we're not talking about whether any one belief is right or wrong. Nope. Instead, we're going to focus on the psychological frameworks that can help us understand the human experience of faith.
To guide us on this journey, we're going to lean on two really powerful psychological concepts. First up, we've got attachment theory, which is all about our basic fundamental need for connection. Then we'll get into attribution theory, which looks at our deep-seated drive to find meaning in the world. And believe me, together they form a pretty amazing blueprint for belief.
So, first up, attachment. Let's start by looking at faith through a pretty surprising lens. Our very first, most foundational human relationships, the ones we have with our parents.
So, what even is attachment theory? Well, it was originally created to explain that intense, absolutely critical bond between a baby and their caregiver. You know, it's that built-in psychological system that makes sure we seek out protection and comfort when we're small and totally vulnerable.
Okay, and here is where things get really interesting. Psychologists started noticing that for a lot of believers, God functions almost exactly like an ideal parent. This divine figure provides two critical things: a safe haven, a place to go for comfort when you're stressed or scared, and a secure base, which is like a reliable anchor that gives you the confidence to go out and explore the world.
And this isn't just some nice metaphor. The research shows this has real, measurable effects, something they call the secure base effect. Believing that there's a powerful, benevolent ally who's always there for you is actually linked to things like lower rates of depression and higher self-esteem. It makes sense, right? It can lower our background anxiety about all the uncertainties of life.
So, if faith can work kind of like a parental bond, how does that bond actually form in the first place? Well, psychology suggests there are two very different roads that can lead to the exact same destination.
So let's dig into that. Is our relationship with God something that makes up for what we maybe lacked in childhood, or is it something that just continues the patterns we've already learned?
All right, let's break down these two main pathways. On one side, you've got what's called the repair model. This often applies to people who had insecure or maybe distant relationships with their parents. For them, God can become a substitute, the perfect, all-loving parent they never had. This can sometimes lead to those sudden, dramatic conversion experiences. Then, on the other side, you have the mirror model. This is more common for people who grew up with really secure, loving parents. For them, their view of God tends to just, mirror that positive relationship, and their faith usually develops more gradually over time. Of course, this is a spectrum. For most people, it's probably a unique mix of both repair and reflection.
Okay, so that's the relationship piece of the puzzle. Now let's pivot and look at the second pillar, our deep, very human need to make sense of the world, to find some meaning in all the chaos.
And that brings us to our second big idea, attribution theory. At its heart, this is basically the study of how we explain stuff. When something unexpected happens, good or bad, how do we figure out the cause? Was it just random luck? Was it something we did? Or was it something else entirely?
While attributing events to a divine power actually scratches three very deep psychological itches. For one, it gives us meaning. It creates a sense that things don't just happen randomly, they happen for a reason. Second, it gives us a sense of control. Now, it's not direct control, but what psychologists call vicarious control, which is basically the comfort of knowing that someone powerful and good is in charge, and you can appeal to them. And third, it can give our self-esteem a real boost, because it makes us feel seen and cared for by the most powerful force in the universe.
But here's the thing. Our brains don't always apply these explanations evenly, not at all. In fact, researchers have found this powerful psychological pattern they call the God bias.
Just think about it for a second. When a believer gets that promotion they wanted, or recovers from a serious illness, who gets the credit? And on the flip side, when a terrible tragedy strikes, who gets the blame? The answers to those questions reveal a really powerful psychological mechanism at work.
And what we find is this really clear asymmetry. Positive events are often seen as blessings, right? Direct interventions from God. But negative events,
They're almost never blamed directly on God. Instead, they're attributed to these secondary causes, things like human free will or the devil, or maybe it's just a test. It's basically a version of what psychologists call a self-serving bias, but it's projected onto a divine figure.
So why? Why does this bias exist? Well, it all comes back to protecting that attachment relationship. I mean, think about it. If you saw God as the direct cause of your pain and suffering, that would make the divine a source of fear, not a source of comfort. So this God bias works like a psychological defense mechanism. It protects our secure base, making sure that that relationship stays a source of safety and comfort.
So now we can bring it all together. We have our fundamental need for a relationship, which is explained by attachment theory, and we have our deep-seated need for meaning, which is explained by attribution theory. These two powerful forces don't just exist side by side, they weave together to create this incredible blueprint for belief.
So here it is, the psychological blueprint in its simplest form. Attachment theory gives us the relationship part of the equation, our deep need to connect with a figure that is protective and always there for us. And then attribution theory gives us the meaning, our drive to interpret the world in a way that makes sense and, most importantly, protects that vital relationship.
And this leaves us with one final big thought to chew on. This blueprint for belief, this combination of our need for attachment and our search for meaning, is an incredibly powerful force. So the question is, where else in your life do you see it working? In your relationships, your career, maybe even your politics? How are you using these exact same psychological tools to make sense of your world?